NASCAR's added a new rule to benefit themselves in the 2011 Spire Motorsports lawsuit, and there's some very interesting and wild, silly season rumors that have been going around for the lower series and upper series as well. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight those really quickly. And we're just going to take a look at some paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Todd Gilliland's 2025 Generator IU Lab scheme that we'll see this weekend at the Brickyard 400. Honestly, scheme actually looks not too bad in my opinion. I love the colors on it, and I love the partnership and the collaboration we've got here. It does look solid. Looking forward to seeing the racetrack at Indy. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Kyle Seek's 2025 Fast Park scheme that we'll see this weekend at Indianapolis. Car looks okay in my opinion. Think the colors are decent. I do like the greenish brownish kind of color they've got. It's alright. It does look okay. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Justin Haley's 2025 Gainbridge TED scheme that we'll see at the Brickyard 400. Car looks alright in my opinion. I do like the cars. Kind of looks very similar to the Garner trucking car that we've seen Justin Haley and Corey LaJoie have in the past. It does look alright though. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Chris Buescher's 2025 Diet Cherry Coke scheme that we'll see at the Brickyard 400. This is definitely one of my favorite RFK racing paint schemes we've seen so far this year. Everything works perfectly with this car. The Diet Cherry Coke look, the good utilization of the sponsorship placement, the colors on the car pop very, very well. It looks amazing and it looks great. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Kyle Larson's 2025 Hendrick Carr Zach Brown Band scheme that we'll see at Las Vegas Motor Speedway in October. Honestly, car doesn't look amazing from the original render. When you actually take a look at the Lionel render, it looks a lot better. It is definitely a different look, I will say. I do like some of the things. They've got a gold number on there. It is certainly interesting. It's also cool to see Zach Brown Band is getting more associated with sport after performing at the Chicago Street Course. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ryan Ellis's 2025 Renaissance scheme that we'll see in the Xfinity Series race at Indianapolis. Car looks alright in my opinion. I do think the cars look okay overall. It does look solid. He has some decent stuff with it too. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Indianapolis. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Cookie Monster. As it was announced on Monday morning, the Cookie Monster will give the command for the 2025 Brickyard 400. Cookie Monster, I think we all know. If you watched Sesame Street as a kid growing up, you probably know who Cookie Monster is. This is certainly a very interesting move. We've seen kind of like the Muppets give command before. I can't remember who it was. I think like that superhero that was on like the Muppets thing gave the command for like 2014 Auto Club 400 if I'm not mistaken. So this is not the first time we've seen a Muppet, of course, give the command for the race, but it's certainly an interesting move for sure. Cookie Monster probably say something like Cookie and then probably say driver start your engines or something like that. Not entirely sure how they're going to do this, but I think it is certainly interesting, a kind of interesting move to bring Cookie Monster in to give the command for the event. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Pascal Skiam. As it was announced yesterday that Pascal Skiam will be the pace car driver for the 2025 Brickyard 400. Pascal currently plays right now for the Indiana Pacers. I think he's been an all-star person in the NBA a couple times in his career. I think it's a very interesting move. Someone who, of course, is local to the area. Makes a lot of sense in my opinion. I love when we bring locals in who have had success in the NBA, who are part of the Indiana Pacers. I think that NASCAR last year had some people that are associated with the Pacers come in and do stuff like this. So I think this actually is a very interesting move. Nonetheless, pretty interesting that he will become the pace car driver for the 2025 Brickyard 400. Really interesting stuff. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Logan Bearden. As it was officially confirmed yesterday that Logan Bearden will drive the 07 for SS Greenlight Racing this weekend in the Xfinity Series race at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Logan Bearden is someone who's made a couple starts so far in 2025. He, of course, made a couple starts last year also with the SS Greenlight Racing team. And actually had a really solid run. I remember at Richmond where he ran inside the top 10 and top 15 in points in that event. And I think Logan is still a very solid race car driver. It's a shame that Logan really hasn't gotten the chance and an opportunity to make more starts in the sport because I actually think Logan Bearden is actually a really talented guy who I just think deserves a fair shake and a fair opportunity because I've seen what this guy can do in underfunded equipment. I would love to see what he could do in like a little better equipment. Like I'm not saying like he needs like top level equipment, but I think you give him decent equipment, he probably could perform very, very well. But this still is a solid opportunity for him. I think he's actually going to do a decent job, all things considered. I think they're going to bring to pace and speed for Logan. I know SS Greenlight, they're kind of one of those slower teams, the smaller teams in the middle to back of the field. I think they're going to do solid for sure, and I think that Logan will have a decent chance and an opportunity for maybe a top 30 finish this weekend at Indianapolis. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Minelli Hogman Racing. As it was announced on Monday morning that Minelli Hogman Racing are making a crew chief swap for this weekend's NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race at Indianapolis Raceway Park. So Josh Graham, who has been the crew chief for Daniel Hemrick throughout 2025, will now be the crew chief for Jack Wood starting this weekend. While Kevin Belcourt, who has been the crew chief for Jack Wood this season, will now become the crew chief for Daniel Hemrick for the remainder of the year. This is definitely an interesting move because Josh Graham has gotten a win so far this year with Daniel Hemrick, that being in Barnesville, but that 19 truck hasn't had the pace and speed. And the 91 truck with the veteran Kevin Belcourt just hasn't done fantastic either. I think this actually will benefit both drivers. I think Kevin Belcourt should have absolutely worked with Daniel Hemrick from the get-go. He's had a lot of experience working with that 16 truck, or the truck that they're going to run, considering that he actually was a crew chief for Derek Kraus in 2020, and they nearly made the playoffs that year. So I really think this actually is a very solid move to make the move from Minelli Hogman Racing. I think that they're making a very interesting move in the middle of the season. It's kind of very similar to what we've seen from ThorSport over the years. I think it's an interesting move, and I do think it actually will benefit both, and I think both will actually have a decent chance and maybe a solid opportunity to do very, very well in these events going forward, including this weekend at IRP. And now we're going to head to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Goodyear tire test. As Bob Pockers reported yesterday, that currently yesterday and today, there's been a Goodyear tire test that's been taking place at New Hampshire and Loudon Motor Speedway. Ross Chastain for Chevrolet, Christopher Bell for Toyota, and Joey Logano for Ford. I think we all can just pretty much say at this point, with Christopher Bell already getting an advantage going into the weekend at New Hampshire, he's obviously going to be the favorite to win that event. Bell has been extremely dominant at New Hampshire the last couple of years. He won the event in 2022 in Cup, won the event in 2024 in Cup, and also won the Xfinity Series race on that weekend. And of course, won multiple Xfinity Series races at that track as well. Christopher Bell has just got a knack for running at that track, like Jeff Burton was in the original rate few times he ran at New Hampshire. We won there like 1997 and 1998. And that race where he dominated in 2000. And I think Bell is going to be very, very good in that event. I expect that 20 car to be the favorite going in. I think it's important to have Goodyear tire tests. I feel like it shouldn't probably go to someone who's extremely dominant at a track. It probably should help, if you're looking for to give an advantage, it could help Trackhouse Racing. They'll get their cars better, considering you're going to have both Chastain and Shaman Gisberg in the playoffs this year, with both of them scoring wins and both being solid at times this year. I think it will also benefit Logano, because last time Logano got an opportunity for a tire test, he actually got better and went on to win the championship, though I don't agree with it personally. Nonetheless, very interesting move for an up-year Goodyear tire test, and are currently doing Goodyear tire test. It's not open to the public currently at the moment, so unfortunately people like myself could not go out there and check it out. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Toronto TV ratings for the IndyCar race. As it was reported by Adam Stern on Tuesday morning that Fox got 734,000 viewers for Sunday's IndyCar race at Toronto. That is up from 504,000 from the last time they raced on linear TV in 2019, where they were on NBC. Of course, the last couple of years, the race has not been on TV, as it has been one of the few exclusive races that has been on Peacock in like 2022, in 2023, and 2024 as well. I think it is certainly interesting, the numbers, when you look at it. Obviously, 734,000 is not a great number, considering that the Indy 500 had, I think, like 7.5 million viewers, I'm pretty sure, this year. The most watched Indy 500 in a very, very long time. When you only have about 10% of your audience, that is very, very concerning. And many in the industry of IndyCar have already said that they are not expecting that number to get much higher throughout the remainder of the year. Now, they probably got a little bit even higher viewership this time around, considering that the NASCAR race had not started at that point, and probably by the end of the event, a lot of people had left. But I will say the race itself was actually not that bad. I think the racing itself for the racing itself was actually not terrible in my opinion. So I think that's what maybe kept people interested and drawn in to continue watching the event. Nonetheless, I don't think the ratings are completely embarrassing. I don't think they're completely horrendous. They definitely could be worse, but they definitely could be better. And I think they should have probably been better in my honest opinion. They definitely could have been a little better. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Xfinity Series Dober TV ratings. As it was reported by Jeff Gluck of The Athletic that the CW got 1.047 million viewers at Dober. That is up 19% from the event in 2024. That event, of course, took place on April and was on FS1. That was not unlike Fox, for example. But still, I believe that of the 20 or 21 NASCAR Xfinity Series races that have taken place this year, I believe there's only been 2 or maybe 3 races this year that have had under 1 million viewers. That is a really, really huge deal for the Xfinity Series because that has been number one of the big things they've had is consistency. And I get that the app has not been working and they still haven't really gotten the app up to this point. They said they were going to have that ready. But a lot of people have been tuning into the Xfinity Series, and a lot of people probably don't even watch like the Cup Series at this point. They mainly focus on the CW in the Xfinity Series. And another big reason why I think people tune into it is because the coverage actually, say what you want to say. I know they've had some cracks this year recently, but I think that their coverage actually has been pretty solid when they've been on TV. I think that Adam Alexander's done a good job. Their guests have actually been all pretty fun to watch, and I think the CW has done a solid job overall, all things considered, with their coverage this year. They should be probably really happy about that at this particular point. So I love hearing these numbers. Over 1 million people tuning in to see Connor Zilisch win, who will very likely be in the NASCAR Cup Series next year. We do expect that announcement probably in the not so distant future. Wish it would have come yesterday, but I think it's good to see this nonetheless, and I think the CW's numbers for this weekend are pretty good. Good to see over 1 million people come in and tune into the Xfinity Series race, and I'm glad to see that we're having a pretty loyal fan base that can tune in, because I think the Xfinity Series also puts on some of the best racing in NASCAR overall, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead to on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Christian Eckes. As it was announced yesterday that Christian Eckes will make a couple NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series starts in 2025. As it was announced, he'll drive the number 16 for Minelli Hogman Racing at Richmond and then also run in the playoff Truck Series race at New Hampshire Motor Speedway. Christian Eckes, of course, currently drives full-time in the number 16 car for Kaulig Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series currently at the moment. He hasn't been, though, as strong in the Xfinity Series as we thought, though I will say that 16 car in the last 6 or 7 races has really, really improved. But the series that he was extremely dominant in last year was, of course, the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series, where he had absolutely a dominant season, where he went on to basically be one of the best guys all year, and really the only guy throughout the season that could keep up with Corey Heim, and at times actually outperform Corey Heim throughout the season. I expect him to be a major, major factor in these 2 races. He was really good at Richmond last year, if I remember correctly, and no one has ever really ran in New Hampshire before, but I think Eckes will be a major factor, because let's be real and honest with the Craftsman Truck Series, there is not a massive amount of competition currently at the moment. There isn't that competition level that I think a lot of people were really expecting going into this year, and I think we absolutely need to see that improvement. Yes, Chandler Smith and Lane Briggs have done a really good number against Corey Heim, but I think most of us agree that Corey Heim is ready to move up. But now you've got the guy who challenged Corey Heim most of the year coming back and racing in these races. I expect Christian Eckes to be very, very good against Corey Heim. I think Heim is still going to be the odds-on favorite to win these races coming up, but I do expect that Christian Eckes will actually give a run for his money and do a phenomenal and very, very solid job in this event. So I expect him to be a major, major contender when we do get to Richmond. I think he's going to have a very solid car for sure, and I think he's also going to have a pretty good chance and an opportunity to be really, really competitive at New Hampshire Motor Speedway as well, as I do expect those cars to be very, very good for sure. I think he's going to be good. The Minelli car trucks have taken a little bit of a step backwards this year, but I do expect that he'll be really solid, and I think he definitely will be very, very strong with the team at Richmond and New Hampshire as well, and he could be looking to prepare for next year with rumors of some things with Kaulig Racing currently at the moment going on that we'll talk about in just a short little bit. Nonetheless, glad to see that he'll be with the Minelli Hogman Racing team for a couple races in 2025. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the 2026 IndyCar schedule. Now, Nathan Brown from the Indy Star wrote up an article on some of the rumors he's heard around the 2026 IndyCar schedule. Now, keep this in mind, the 2026 IndyCar schedule It's still not been released at this point, and that schedule could come at any given time. But one big thing that's been talked about is some of the potential oval replacements that could come in to replace a certain event. That, of course, being Iowa. There has been a lot of chatter and a lot of discussion in recent weeks that IndyCar will not be returning to Iowa Speedway in 2026. Now, Iowa, obviously, there's a couple reasons why there's been a lot of talk about this. Number one, the racing, while I think it was better than last year by a wide margin, the racing just hasn't been that good at Iowa Speedway. You also lost the entitlement sponsorship from Hy-Vee at the end of last year, and then, of course, very few people showed up. Now, that, unfortunately, is a lack of promotion from Iowa Speedway on their front, but, of course, we all got to remember who owns Iowa Speedway, and that is NASCAR. And the event itself, and the Twitter account or the X account only has like 3,000 or 4,000 people that follow that account, so that definitely didn't help anything at that point. But it's a shame, too, because we need to see short ovals on the schedule. But there are a couple potential replacing candidates that could be coming in 2026. One of those, it's Richmond Raceway. Now, according to what we remember back in 2020, originally Richmond Raceway is supposed to be on the schedule in 2020. But then, of course, unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic hit. And unfortunately, they never got the chance to go back to Richmond. They never ran like a settlement race during that time, even though NASCAR would go to Richmond that year. They never went to Richmond. Another track that's been brought up as a possibility is Homestead Miami Speedway. Now, IndyCar has not raced at Homestead since like 2008 or 2009, I'm pretty sure. So it's been nearly 15 to 20 years since the last time they raced. And if it was 2009, it will have been 17 years since the last time they raced at that track. I'm going to be very interested to see what track they go to for next year. Because honestly, I think Richmond, which put on really good races for IndyCar up until like 2009 or 2010 when they last raced there. And Homestead for IndyCar also, it's a bigger oval. And IndyCar is really good at the bigger ovals as well. So I think the race would actually be really suited for these IndyCars at a track like Homestead, for example. I'm very interested to see how the racing is, regardless of where we go. But it's a shame to see that Iowa will likely be off the schedule, but they've got their priorities. Also, like I mentioned earlier, NASCAR owns that track, so they're not going to promote IndyCar as much as they're going to promote NASCAR events happening at the track. I'm disappointed here they're likely not going back to Iowa, but at the same token, I'm not surprised considering that NASCAR owns it and there was very little promotion and the ratings really didn't help much considering the ratings were not that great for the event, in my opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the in-season tournament. Now, it was reported by Bob Pockers yesterday very early in the morning, around like 4:30 to 5 o'clock Central Standard Time, that we have just found out something about the in-season tournament. And NASCAR apparently says that the $1 million does not actually go to the driver for the in-season tournament. Instead, it goes to the team owners. Now, Bob did clarify in the comment section below that apparently this is something that has been known from the get-go. Apparently, it's something in the contracts that have been stated, and the drivers will get a percentage of that money. This, in my opinion, kind of kills the priorities of the in-season tournament, because I think the in-season tournament, we all originally thought, and it was never mentioned, by the way, by the people on the NASCAR YouTube channel. I remember when it was announced that they were going to be doing this, and they mentioned this there, that the driver, the winning driver, will get $1 million. They never mentioned in the video, oh, the money's actually going to go to the team owner. Now, I get over the years, that don't get me wrong, we have seen that where NASCAR hasn't given the money to the drivers. Well, and the team owners get it, and that's in their contracts. But why are we just finding out about this now? Again, if we knew about this from the get-go, then NASCAR should have said something. Apparently, it's the drivers from some saying may have known, but I don't understand how it took so long for everybody to find this out. I don't really get that, to be honest. The drivers, and if they knew about that too, they probably should have said something, but probably were not allowed to say anything because it's probably in their contracts, hey, you can't talk about it, so you're not getting the money, and that the team owners are going to get the money. Because then at that point, okay, you lose interest. Because to me, no offense to the team owners, I personally don't think the team owners should be the ones getting the money. I think it should be the drivers who competed in this in the first place that are the ones that should be getting the money, considering they're the ones that did the performance in this stuff, and they're the ones that have been really putting on a great show for this event. So I'm really frustrated to hear this because I just don't understand. Because now, it's cool that Ty Dillon Ty Gibbs made it, but now people are going to lose invested interest in it. And that's a shame because this could have been clarified from the get-go. We should not be finding out about this in the last week of the in-season tournament. We should have been finding out about this like maybe week 2. That would have been fine if they said week 2 or week 3. This is how we're doing it. Should not have taken until 5 days before the final race. That's unacceptable and inexcusable on NASCAR's part. They shouldn't be finding out about that. I'm not a big fan of that. I'm not a fan of waiting to the last minute to tell people what is going on, because that's not genuine, and I don't think that's the best decision on NASCAR's front to wait to the last minute to let us know what's going on with some of the rules, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Dober TV ratings from this past weekend. As it was reported by Adam Stern yesterday, that TNT and True TV got 2.009 million viewers for Sunday's NASCAR Cup Series race at Dover. He does note that during the rain delay, about a 27 to 28% average of the people actually left the event because of the rain delay, because a lot of people thought that the race would end up being over. And when rain delays come on a lot of times, especially the longer they go, the more of your viewership is going to leave. But he also notes that last year, yes, it was in April, but the event got 2.401 million viewers. That's kind of generally been the number this year for the events that have been taking place on TNT. They've only been really getting about 2 to maybe 2.1 or 2.2 million, and I find that to be really disappointing that the numbers can't be a little bit higher. Now, granted, Dover historically, when it comes to TV ratings, it generally does not do very, very well when it's kind of like a shorter oval, but also is because the racing there isn't always that great, because let's be real and honest, I don't think a lot of people came this weekend being really excited for a race at Dover Motor Speedway, because again, the racing at that track has just not been very, very good in the last couple of years. But I think still over 2 million people tuning in is not that bad. Now, that being said, I do wish that number, again, was a little bit better than what we saw, at least for this weekend. So that's disappointing to hear. And again, I think that number would be higher if TNT and True TV would have done a lot of promotion. I think we all know at this point that there was not a ton of promotion that came in. They did some promotion like during the NHL playoffs, but the NHL playoffs ended basically in like June, and we had basically a month basically without any sort of promotion for the series itself. And that's disappointing as well, because I think that True TV number is also down because, again, no one's really interested now in the in-season tournament. I wish that number was definitely a little bit better, because we basically had a near 15 to 20% drop. Now, without the rain delay, I really don't think that number would have been bigger, to be honest. It might have been a little bigger, but I think the rain delay affected a little bit, but I don't really think the rain delay affected it a massive amount. I don't think it made it majorly enough to where it really affected the overall rating, because, well, yes, 2 million people tuned in. That's kind of been the general number we've been getting this year. The most watched race was last week at Sonoma, which Shaman Gisbergen won, where they only had like 2.1 or 2.2 million. That race at Atlanta was not very good in the ratings department. I don't also think their coverage this year has been really good in any way, shape, or form with the coverage this year. So that's another thing to kind of look at as well. Nonetheless, very interesting stuff, and kind of wild to see that the ratings for this time around are not very good, and they're disappointing for this year when it comes to the ratings for TNT and True's coverage from Dover this past weekend. A little disappointing to see the ratings not be very, very good. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Spire Motorsports. As Colby Evans of ARCA Starting Park Car, who actually will make a start this in a couple weeks from now at I believe at Iowa Speedway in the number 86 club for club racing. Congratulations him, by the way, on that. But he posted something from the RacingJunks.com article, and it shows that it looks like Spire Motorsports might be selling off some of its truck series fleet currently at this particular moment. Now, let's talk about this really, really quick. There has been some rumors and there has been some speculation in recent weeks that Spire Motorsports may or may not be shutting down the number 77 truck after this weekend's NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race at Indianapolis Raceway Park. Of course, he is on the entry list for this week. Andres will continue at least driving a 77 truck for this weekend, but the NASCAR Massage Account did post, I believe, a week or so ago that they have heard that that 77 truck is going away. The 77 truck, the last couple years, I think we all can agree that that truck has really struggled. Chase Purdy was not very good in that truck, and Andres, in my opinion, has been bad. He has certainly been worse. That truck has taken even step backwards when Chase Purdy was in that truck. At least Chase Purdy had top 10s in that truck at times. I haven't really seen that from Andres Perez. Now, Andres Perez is also, according to what was in that report, he is expected to jump rides throughout the remainder of the season and finish up the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series season, but will be jumping to probably mid to lower pack rides, unfortunately, and probably not going to get a good opportunity throughout the remainder of the season. Because there are rumors and speculation going around, and there's no confirmation on this, but there's been a rumor that I've seen that Spire Motorsports may be selling off their truck program and moving out to the NASCAR Xfinity Series next year. Kind of what they did in 2023 was they did run some select NASCAR Xfinity Series races for Carson Kvapil. There's been rumors about that. There's nothing verified officially on that one, but there's been rumors, speculation about that. That does have some association with Kaulig Racing that we're going to talk about here in just a little bit. But I think it is certainly interesting that they are selling off some of their truck fleet, right? Because I think that they have had some decent success. I mean, look at the success they've had this year. They've ran very, very well. They've gotten wins. Roger's gotten a couple wins this year. There's also been some talk, been some good runs for other people like Kyle Busch this year, who won a race for the team, got a couple last year for the program. Also, we have Brendan Butterby Queen making a start for the program. And then you think about Roger's gotten a win this year. And then, of course, they've had Michael McDowell, Justin Haley, Jordan Taylor, all those people that have come in. Now, could Spire Motorsports just be downsizing their program for effectively the remainder of the year? That's probably what is going on, at least for this year currently at the moment, but they're not completely downsizing everything at this point right now. So I think it is going to be very interesting to see what happens with Spire Motorsports for the remainder of 2025, how that team is going to perform. I actually do think, at least for the remainder of this year, because they did downsize their 3-truck operation coming up, I think their performance is actually going to get better. I really never understood why they expanded to 4 trucks. I think expanding to 4 trucks has brought a little bit too much of a burden on the organization and has affected the organization and their performance level, because they've not been as strong this year as they've been in prior years. And I think a lot of that is due to the fact that they've expanded really, really quickly and have had a lot more trucks in their stable, and they've had trucks that just haven't been fast. Look at this year, for example, with the 07 truck that just hasn't had a lot of pace and speed in 2025. So we'll see what happens with the remainder of the Spire Motorsports truck fleet, but as of right now, they're selling it off currently at the moment, which is disappointing to hear, but it's not shocking and surprising considering that this season their truck fleet has not been doing as amazing as it has. So I will say they've shown some decent speed at times throughout 2025. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kyle Larson. Now, we did a video covering the story on the channel a couple days ago, but it was announced and confirmed on Monday afternoon that Kyle Larson will drive the number 17 for Hendrick Motorsports in the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. This will be Kyle Larson's third start behind the wheel of the number 17 car. Kyle Larson has made 2 prior starts behind the wheel of that car this season. Of course, he drove that car at Homestead Miami Speedway, dominated the event, led like 129 or 130 of the 200 laps. And if not for a late race caution for, I believe, Taylor Gray spinning out and Sam Mayer giving a terrible push on the final restart, Kyle Larson goes on and easily picks up the win, as he had a 1 point near 20-second lead. Then he drove that car at Bristol Motor Speedway and had a dominating run, pretty much led almost every single lap, led 276 or 277 of the 300 laps that took place in the event, and absolutely dominated that run. Now, what's very interesting about this race is, one, this race is not on the original schedule for Hendrick Motorsports, but number 2, Kyle Larson was actually supposed to be in the CW booth for this weekend, so maybe he'll be in the car being like maybe the in-race reporter. Maybe he'll do some coverage from that. Maybe if he falls out of the race, which I don't expect that for Kyle Larson, considering how good he's at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. But if Larson falls out of the race, maybe he can get up in the booth, or they're going to find someone to replace him. If you're looking for someone to replace, I think that Kyle Busch would be the perfect driver to be the one to be the guy who's been calling it. I think Kyle Busch or Denny Hamlin will be my choice for this, considering I think they've been the 2 best commentators that have been up there this year, and have both done a really solid job. I really enjoyed Denny Hamlin's commentary at Dober, and Kyle Busch, in a few races I've seen him call, he's done a very, very good job in the booth. I think, though, Larson, you go into this race, he's the odds-on favorite to win. I think before this, Connor Zilic have been the odds-on favorite to pick up the win, but I do think at this moment, Kyle Larson will be the odds-on favorite to be the guy that can go out there and pick up the win in the victory. And I do expect that Larson is going to be very strong in Indianapolis Motor Speedway in the Xfinity Series event, considering that 17 car has been extremely good this year with the guys they've had behind the wheel. Of course, this year they've had Corey Day and Jake Finch, who've not been as strong this season, but that should be expected. Meanwhile, William Byron has picked up a win this season, that being at Charlotte Motor Speedway. Chase Elliott had a very good car at Pocono, though they got caught for cheating, unfortunately, later in the week and got some sort of penalty after the car was sent to the R&D center. But Chase Elliott had a fast car at Pocono, and Alex Bowman came very close to winning the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Phoenix as well. So I do think Larson will have a very, very fast car. I think he will be the favorite to win, and he's got a good chance to sweep the weekend, considering I expect Larson to be the odds-on favorite to win the Brickyard 400 this season. So we'll see how things go for Kyle Larson this weekend, but I would not be surprised if Larson not only wins the Cup race, gets his first win since Kansas earlier this year, but also wins the Xfinity Series race and gets his third win of the year. I think he's got a great chance to do it, and I think it'll be very much a major factor in favor to win the race, and I think will be very, very good at Indianapolis Motor Speedway coming up here very, very soon. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Sirius XM drama that happened from yesterday. So, there was a clip that surfaced. Mark Marr was, I think, talking about an old IROC car that he was looking at. And there was a clip that surfaced on Twitter yesterday from something that was said on Sirius XM NASCAR radio. Now, Larry McReynolds and Daniel Trotter were talking about the playoff format in a really, really big way. And they basically, during the clip, Daniel Trotter basically said that there's someone that has been screaming very, very wildly about going back to the original OG style of the Winston Cup format, or the full season format we had from 1975 up until 2003, the one we had for many, many years. And she basically said, I pray to God that basically we don't change the system and go back to the old system. And then Larry McReynolds came in and said, it's probably someone that has never won a championship. Now, Larry McReynolds tried to clarify and say that he was talking about an active driver. I don't know if he mentioned it before in the clip, but he never mentioned it in that 20 or 30 second clip that it was an active driver. And a lot of people, including myself, thought that they were talking about Mark Martin. Mark Martin has been extremely vocal and absolutely wants to go back to the full season format. He's been a major proponent of that. And trust me, I would rather have the full season format as well, but I think there's also compromise to that as well. If they were talking about Mark Martin or Denny Hamlin, regardless of who it is, because a lot of people are now saying it's about Denny Hamlin, Daniel Trotter basically said, oh, Mark, I love you, but we need to go back to the current playoff format that we have currently at the moment right now and keep doing it because keep moving forward. First thing I want to say, and we'll get to talking about if it was about Mark Martin, first thing I want to say, this sport is not moving forward with this format currently at the moment. We have dropped in ratings massively in recent years. I think in like 2003, I think the sport was averaging around like 8.5 to maybe 9 million viewers back then. We're averaging maybe 2.5 to 3 million viewers every single week, most weeks. And recently, we've been on like in the 2 million range. So that is not absolutely true. And also, if the sport was truly moving forward, then why would we be having discussions in the first place about changing the format to begin with? Because we wouldn't be having discussions right now about changing the playoff format if we weren't basically talking about that. And I think also the other thing I want to talk about is extremely offensive for Larry McReynolds and Daniel Trotter to either diss Mark Martin or, of course, Denny Hamlin. Both drivers are extremely successful. Mark Martin, 40-time winner of the NASCAR Cup Series, had to claw his way up. He almost didn't get an opportunity to race in this sport. Tried to make it big as his own driver. Gave Larry McReynolds his first ever crew chiefing opportunity, by the way, in 1982, and gave him that opportunity. And then, of course, Larry McReynolds also, by the way, has never won a championship. He won 23 Cup Series races as a crew chief, but he never won a championship in his career. So Larry McReynolds wants to talk about, oh, let's just say, being a guy who's never won a championship. Guess what, Larry? You've also never won a championship. And same thing for Denny Hamlin, considering Larry McReynolds has been throwing jabs at Denny Hamlin all year. Denny Hamlin was a 58-time NASCAR Cup Series winner, 3-time Daytona 500 winner, multi-time Southern 500 winner, and a Coke 600 winner. And Denny Hamlin is arguably one of the 10 best drivers in NASCAR Cup Series history. There is no denying that. To disrespect either one of these guys, that's unacceptable. Just to get your point across. I've said this for a while that I think the full season format would be the way to go for me, but if we want to keep some sort of compromise toward the system, number one, you don't need to be going and dissing these drivers. I really don't think it's acceptable to go and diss Mark Martin or Denny Hamlin to try to get your point across. I'm not a fan of that. That's ridiculous and totally uncalled for from both Daniel Trotter and also Larry McReynolds. I'm not a fan of that. I think it was ridiculous what they said, and they should be called out for this. Larry said he didn't say that, but then who you're talking about? I'd like to know who you're actually talking about. Instead of just, saying, I pray to God a certain driver doesn't keep going on, just say the name next time so you don't have all this hassle going toward you. I was not a fan of what they said about it. I think that was totally uncalled for, in my opinion. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Chicago Street Course. Now, we all know that the Chicago Street Course will not be returning to the NASCAR Cup Series schedule in 2026. It is expected to be now sometime today that NASCAR will be racing on the Coronado Naval Base in San Diego. They'll be going there in the 2026 year. But there is a talk currently at the moment that NASCAR could be maybe in the future coming back to Chicago Street Course. According to what was reported, and Alderman said that they are very interested, and there could be a potential possibility that NASCAR could return to the Chicago Street Course as early as 2027. And basically, they all said they could come back in 2028 and also in 2029 as well. And basically, they said that NASCAR would like to come back to Chicago, and they definitely will talk about trying to find a way to get it to work. But they also do mention they have a certain amount of months that they can race in. According to what was reported, it sounds like NASCAR wants to race in June, July, or August in the Chicago area, which actually makes a lot of sense considering that's about the best weather times, because for what people have said, I know Jarrett's mentioned it on his multiple of his videos around the Chicago area, you really only have a certain amount of time you can race in that area because the weather can either be really cold up until late April going into early May, or then you have the situation with the NFL coming up. You only have a few months where you can really race, because Chicago, they want this event to stick around. They wanted to stick around, but the problem is that they wanted to race at a different time on the schedule, and they weren't wanting to race basically on the 4th of July anymore because of the hassle that was going on. But NASCAR, of course, they wanted to continue racing in the Chicago area. They wanted to stay in the Chicago area currently at the moment, and they wanted to be on the street course. Now, what does this still mean, though, for the Chicago area going in 2026? Like I mentioned just a minute ago, NASCAR will announce today that they will be racing in San Diego on the Coronado Naval Base, so they'll be not really racing on a street course, per se, in a sense, but they'll be racing kind of like an airport area, a peninsula that has an airport there on a naval base. I expect that to be on the 4th of July weekend. But I think that they should go back to Chicago in the future. I think that there is definitely a way to work around it. Now, I personally have said, though, multiple times that I don't want to see two street course races on the schedule. I think that the street course should be its own unique thing, like a dirt race, for example. If NASCAR ever added a dirt race on the schedule, I think there should be one of those events. I don't think you need multiple of these events going on at the same time. I think there's a way you can bridge that gap and make that absolutely work. So I think that there is certainly a possibility on that front that you could do that for sure. I think that we can get Chicago Street Course back on the schedule. And hey, at the moment, Shane Van Gisbergen is the king currently at the Chicago Street Course. But you can absolutely 100% for sure have two of these races happening at the same time. I'm going to be very interested to see what happens with the remainder of the Chicago Street Course going forward and how things work out for the future of the Street Course event. But I think there's a very strong chance and possibility that down the road we are going to go back to the Chicago Street Course. I absolutely would love to see the Chicago Street Course return for sure in the 2026 season. I would absolutely love that for sure, and I hope it does, not 2027, but I also would like to, because I think that they're going to want to do two races, because I think Chicago will get more than 1 year on the schedule. They could alternate it. I've seen some people suggest they could alternate every other year, or 1 year they go to Chicago, and like next year, and then the next year go back to Chicago, then 1 year go back to Chicago, and in 28 and 29 go back to Chicago Street Course. I think that would be interesting, but also I think some people wouldn't be happy. Some have also suggested having two races in the same area. That could be something that could be worked out for sure, but I'm not sure if many people are going to accept that on that front. Nonetheless, I think that them returning to Chicago in the future would be really fun to do. There's also a lot of other cities that are interested in having street course races. We do know a few that are very interested. We know that, like I said, we're going to San Diego next year. We know that Pittsburgh's been interested. We know Denver's been interested, and even Cincinnati has been very interested as well on that front. So we'll see what happens with the Chicago Street Course and the future of it. But again, like I mentioned, San Diego is going to get announced at some point today. And then, of course, we do hope they come back in the future. But as of right now, I'm not exactly sure when they are going to return to the Chicago Street Course. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode, as we're talking a little bit of silly season and some of the wild and wacky rumors that have been going around as of late with NASCAR silly season at this particular point. There are three silly season reports in particular that we're going to talk about today. The first one revolves around Justin Haley. There has been some talk and there has been some chatter from some that have been saying that they don't think that Justin Haley will return to the Spire Motorsports organization in 2026. Many think that Justin Haley Haley is not performing in that number 7 car currently at the moment, and some also think that this could be a potential landing spot for Daniel Suarez, though Daniel Suarez's name has been linked also to Legacy Motor Club for next year, if Legacy does in fact do get a third car. Now, Justin Haley, I've said this, yes, he has not had a great season with this organization in 2025. However, I really don't put full blame on Justin Haley for the lack of performance. It's not all Justin Haley's fault that car has not been good. 9 races in a year, he lost his crew chief of Rodney Childers, he lost his car chief of Cheddar Smith, who went over to work with Ty Gibbs, and we've seen that car really take major improvements throughout this year. And also, of course, we've seen all the picker members get swapped. So the whole entire team got taken from Justin Haley. They've lost all the performance. We also do expect Rodney will be a crew chief somewhere next year, more than likely. He kind of confirmed that a couple weeks back. But I really think that there absolutely should be no way Justin Haley gets released from this car. And I really don't think if Daniel Suarez goes in this car in particular, I really don't see Daniel Suarez performing. So I think that Justin Haley personally should get a one more year in this car. Again, I understand that this has not been a good season for Justin Haley with Spire Motorsports right now, but I do 100% believe that he should have at least one more year and one more season with Spire Motorsports, and I hope it happens that he gets one more year with the team. Now, if he struggles next season in this car, then you make the change, sure, because that other 2 cars have been performing a lot better, but I personally think he should at least get one more season in this car next season. Next rumor we need to talk about is Kaulig Racing. Now, there has been a few people that have been bringing up this wild rumor that Kaulig Racing may not have a NASCAR Xfinity Series program in 2026. Now, keep in mind, these are just some wild rumors, and there's rumors that they could potentially be the team that might become the Dodge Truck Series team in 2026. I think Left Turn Man 500 brought this up on Twitter, and they've been actually pretty accurate at times when things have happened. There's been a lot of talk that they could potentially be the team that does go to Dodge, at least for the Craftsman Truck Series next year. There's also rumors as well, like I mentioned earlier in the video, that Spire Motorsports may potentially be going up to the Xfinity Series next year. Maybe you're going to see a swap between Spire and Kaulig, where potentially I saw someone mention maybe Christian Eckes and Daniel Dye are going to stick around in this car, or maybe Roger will join the Spire Motorsports Xfinity Series team next year. I think that would be very, very interesting if those are the 3 drivers behind the wheel. But let's say Kaulig Racing does go to the Craftsman Truck Series next year with the Dodge program in particular. I think that, again, would be very, very interesting because Kaulig Racing, I think, would actually be a team that could take things seriously because we know for sure at the moment that Nice is not going to Dodge, and we don't really know right now who else is going into the Dodge program. We need to start kind of finding that out here really soon because we're starting to get into August. Yes, they're looking to do some sort of Driver X program like Roush did for many, many years, but I'm not sure if they're going to get someone that's going to be super, super successful because, yes, you had some people that came from that program like the Gong Show, like Carl Edwards and all those people that came in, and, of course, Scott Ray's was part of that at one point, and you had other people that came through like Kurt Busch, for example, but then you had some people like Todd Cleaver that didn't really work out very, very well and kind of struggled there. I think it'd be very interesting to see if Kaulig Racing, though, could be the potential team, and we'll see if this rumor comes true. Nothing verified, there's just rumors about that. But the big rumor that's been having a lot of legs as of late that many of you have probably clicked on is Carson Kvapil. There's been a lot of talk that Carson Kvapil has signed a development deal with Team Penske for the 2026 season. Now, it was noted in some of the rumor mills that Carson Kvapil could potentially still be a junior motorsports driver in 2026 if Team Penske, of course, does not bring back their NASCAR Xfinity Series program. But there is a lot of potential possibility that Penske could potentially bring back their Xfinity Series program in 2026. Now, this, of course, would be full circle for this team, as, of course, Carson Kvapil, his father, Travis Kvapil, drove for the organization in a couple select races in 2004 and drove in 2005 full-time in a 77 car. That was around the time the Penske Jasper Racing team kind of was around. Of course, in 2004, I think that they acquired the number 77 car from the Jasper Racing team that Dave Blaney had driven previously in 2003, and they ended up working over there and having that 77 car for a very, very long time. Now, Carson Kvapil this season at Junior Motorsports has had a pretty solid season over JRM, as he, of course, has not picked up a win, but he's had some really good runs, has shown some decent performance. He's currently above the playoffs currently at the moment, but I think if Team Penske gets their program up and running next year, he would be a really good potential candidate long-term down the road for a Team Penske NASCAR Cup Series seat. Now, the problem is, Joey Logano and Ryan Blaney are both under long-term contracts with Team Penske, to my understanding. And then, of course, you do have Austin Cindric, who does have a contract at least through 2026. Now, I don't think Carson Kvapil is fully ready for a NASCAR Cup Series ride, but there are Cup Series teams that are very, very interested in Carson Kvapil currently at this moment that would absolutely love to have Carson Kvapil on their team going going into next year. But I think if they bring back their Xfinity program and Carson goes there, this could also be the landing spot for Daniel Suarez at number 1 car next year. Many do expect that we're going to see Daniel Suarez could end up in the Junior Motorsports NASCAR Xfinity Series team next year and be behind the wheel of that car. So we'll see what happens with the team going forward, and we'll see what happens with Team Penske going into next year if they do bring back their program with some of the other silly season rumors and rumblings that have been happening. But like I said, I do expect that you're going to see a few pretty major moves that are going to happen with this silly season coming up. Some major movement that will happen this year. And again, I'm very interested to see how things kind of fly with it. But again, I do expect that team, if Penske does bring back their program, I do expect that Carson Kvapil, like I already mentioned, will be one of the drivers behind the wheel of that seat. And I do think that Carson Kvapil could run very, very well. We'll see how things go, and we'll see if he does, in fact, end up heading over to Team Penske next year. We'll see how things end up working out for that program in 2026. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're talking about updates in the 23XI Racing and Front Row Motorsports lawsuit. Now, there's been some very interesting updates that have come out around the 23XI and Front Row Motorsports lawsuit in the last couple of weeks. Now, according to something that was put out on Monday, and Jeff Gluck and many reporters noted this as well, NASCAR has added a new rule to benefit them in the 2025 year, where they are going to limit the amount of entries that will enter races going forward starting this weekend at the Brickyard 400. They are going to limit up to the amount of entries that can enter an event, not limit how many can actually race. No. Limit how many can actually enter the event, and will only have 40 cars available for most races going forward. This will ensure that 23XI Racing and Front Row Motorsports will be able to make every single race going forward. I am personally not a big fan of this rule change. I don't think this rule change should absolutely be a thing, and I'm not a fan of them adding a new rule just to benefit them. But there is a big reason why NASCAR has added this new rule. It's to benefit them in the 23XI Racing and Front Row Motorsports lawsuit. Currently, 23XI and Front Row have sued, and one thing that they have claimed in their new antitrust preliminary injunction, which we'll talk about here in just a second, is that they are not guaranteed to race in every single event. They say that they are, because them being an open team does not guarantee the opportunity to run in every single event going forward, and instead will have to run as open teams and not get as much money, and they're worried they'll lose the opportunity to keep their drivers in their program as well. NASCAR added this rule to make sure that there's no chance and possibility now that they can make a single race and not get any sort of money. That's why they added this rule to help them out in the case. Speaking of which, let's talk about the preliminary injunction very, very quick. Preliminary injunction is set for August 28th, so we have to wait a little over a month, which does confirm that 23XI Front Row will be open teams at least up until the weekend of Daytona International Speedway. So they will be open teams this week in Indianapolis, next weekend, which I believe is at Iowa, if I'm not mistaken. Then the week after that, I believe at Richmond or Watkins Glen, then Watkins Glen, and then, of course, as of now, at Daytona International Speedway. They will be an open team up until the final race of the race. Now, if they do end up losing their preliminary injunction case, which there is a good chance they could do that, NASCAR could go ahead and sell those charters. But NASCAR has told the judge multiple times that at this moment right now, they do not plan to sell any of the charters from 23XI and Front Row until the ruling comes out of the preliminary injunction. This preliminary injunction will basically 100% confirm whether 23XI and Front Row will be charter teams for the remainder of the year and get their charters back, or will lose their charters, and NASCAR could potentially sell those charters off before the end of the year. And I think that move would absolutely be very interesting, but I also would not be the biggest fan if they were to in fact sell those charters from 23XI and Front Row. The reason I would not be a fan personally is because let's say 23XI and Front Row do overall win the case. There's a very possible chance that they could win this case, by the way. There's a very good chance, because that will be December 1st. Denny Hamlin stated multiple times. Come December 1st to the trial, and you'll get to hear a lot of the information that you've been wanting to hear as an industry for a very, very long time. I personally think that we're going to find out a lot of stuff from that, but there is a chance, let's say, that they sell the charters right to a team like Legacy, who wants to expand a 3-car team. A team, obviously, like, let's say, RFK, who wants to make sure they have 3 cars long-term going forward so they don't have to continue leasing from the organization of Rick Ware Racing. Same with TJ Pusher's Rick Ware Racing team trying to become a 3-car team. You have a lot of that going on currently at the moment, and they would have to give those charters back over to 23XI in Front Row. Then you're going to have more litigation that is going to come up. I think the judge should say, once the ruling of preliminary injunction happens, I personally think he should say that those have to go into an escrow account, and those charters cannot be sold to other organizations and teams. I think that's how it should be in the ruling of the preliminary injunction. But I personally think that that's not how things are going to fly with that preliminary injunction. But going back to the rule, I am not a fan, and I think it's kind of ridiculous that we have to cap the amount of entries. Again, it makes sense why they're doing it. I know people are going to say, how does it make sense? It makes sense so they can benefit them in the lawsuit and help them in the case of 25 front row. So they're basically saying, oh, we're not limiting how many times that they could basically come out, and we're not limiting how many races that they could miss. We're basically saying, they can't miss any races going forward. We're guaranteeing we're not going to have more than 40 entries, and we made a rule, at least for the foreseeable future, to really benefit themselves. I really hope with this rule that got announced, I really hope and pray that this rule does not last very, very long. This rule probably should go away as soon as a preliminary injunction ruling comes out. I really don't like that they're trying to benefit themselves in this case, and a lot of people are going to be are looking at this and thinking, yeah, they added this rule to benefit them in the lawsuit. It's completely obvious, and most reporters and most journalists have looked at this situation, including myself, and have said, yeah, this is not absolutely, look, I'm not saying I'm a reporter, I've just seen this, and I saw this, I'm like, yeah, they're absolutely benefiting themselves in this case. So it will go by owner's points quintessentially is how that rule is going to work, and again, I'm just not a fan of limiting the amount of cars that can make a race every single year to try to benefit themselves in a lawsuit in a case currently at the moment. I don't think it's a smart decision on NASCAR's part, but I'm not shocked and surprised because NASCAR has done things before like this to try to benefit themselves and try to get away with things in this industry. I'm not a fan of making a rule to try to benefit themselves in a lawsuit, but again, it's obvious why they did it, and it makes sense why they did it to try to help themselves in the case against Michael Jordan, Denny Hamlin, Bubba Wallace, Tyler Reddick, Riley Herbst, Zane Smith, Todd Gillen, and Noah Gragson. So as more lawsuit update information comes out, we'll talk about it, but I'm kind of tired of covering this story. Can you please get some actual other stuff? Please, I would really appreciate if more stuff came out about it and other things came out in the future. So that is going to be today's long NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's go to the bar of that and comment your thoughts below on today's video. What are your thoughts about the 2311 front row lawsuit? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about potential possibility of Carson Kvapil having a deal with Team Penske? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Later today on the channel, we're going to have a video talking about the San Diego announcement, as that will be announced later today around the Coronado Naval Base. And then, of course, we'll probably do Xfinity Series race picks on the channel. We'll have to wait and see. Then, of course, on Thursday, we'll have Cup race picks, the Breakout Corner. We might also have Xfinity Series race picks for Indy as well. We'll just have to wait and see. The Penske video is going to come out either Friday or some time around there. And then, of course, we're going to have content coming on people like Haley Deegan, Shaman Gisberg, and Cards, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Bob Wallace, Ross Chastain, Connor Zillage, Sam Mayer, Sheldon Creed, Frankie Muniz, Clayton Safar, Dodge Ram, you name it, Colleague Racing, Junior Motorsports, all the good stuff, Brian Priest, all that we'll talk about on the channel in the coming days and weeks. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.